Please be advised that Little Miss Recap contains adult language.
I think it's the same drive that allows me to tell stories in books and on TV. Because let's face it, anybody who writes a book or goes on TV with the notion that they have a story worth telling that people might want to listen to, you're really already, by definition now, a sort of an aberrant personality and a monster of self-regard. This is a very unreasonable attitude. I have a story that you will want to listen to for 10 minutes. Why would any reasonable, and I might make a living doing that. Some people might even want to pay for that story to the point that I could make a living doing that rather than washing dishes or preparing meals. That's not normal.
Hi everyone, welcome to Little Miss Recap, the podcast where we get up at the crack of dawn to talk about our favorite chef and writer in the whole world.
Yeah, we do. God, watching this just made me ache for him.
He's everything. He's everything to me.
He's brilliant. He's handsome. He's funny. He's worldly. Oh God.
We'll get there. But today we're going to talk about Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain, and I'm your host, Amye Archer, and I'm here with the lovely Amanda Lipnack-Radell. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, Amy. Hello, friends. I was gonna say, welcome to the show that never ends. I always feel like I want to keep saying that, but our show does end, so it does not quite.
It does, and everybody's glad it does. I think
eventually, yeah. Though maybe some people want to listen to us all day, every day. Can't stop, won't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop. Okay, so let me open by saying that this film was well received when it came out. So we're talking about Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain, 2021. It was on Max. It was in the theaters too. I saw it in the theater.
I did not, because I think that was during a time when we were still iffy about going to movie theaters. So, but yeah.
Well, as you can imagine, I think we were the only two people in the theater.
Probably. You're probably just fine.
The filmmaker was Morgan Neville. So this film was critically well received, but there was a problem. There was a controversy. So he kind of brushed past the fact that he used AI twice in the film to reenact Anthony's voice.
I thought that must have been because I'm like, how are you getting a voice here?
And he claims it was only in two spots. One was to read, I think it was to read the emails that he had sent to Joel Rose.
Okay.
The initial email before he was famous.
Right.
And then there's another part where he said he fills it in a little bit. Now, he had said at the time, because people were freaking out about this, and he had said at the time, I checked with Tony's family. They're fine with it.
Yeah.
Octavia has said, nobody ran that past me. And I would not have been okay with it.
Oh, interesting.
So, and she would have been the closest next to kin at the time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. He was never married.
He never married Azia,
who I always want to call Azia.
I know.
God, she is beautiful.
She's gorgeous, but problematic at best.
At best, yeah. To me, that feels like not a bad use of AI. If one is going to do it, because it's him reading his own words.
Right. I think that AI was just so new at the time to us, to the general public. I mean, in tech, AI has been around forever.
Yeah,
but
it was new to filmmaking too. I mean, there was also the controversy of using Val Kilmer in Maverick.
Oh, right. Yes.
His voice and all that, because he had no voice left.
Yeah.
And
then, but Val Kilmer obviously consented to that.
Yes. Then there was also in the last Ghostbusters, they did AI of Ivan Reitman.
Okay.
So, anyway, it's a weird thing to think about. As someone who works in tech, AI is the only thing anyone's talking about right now. It's really annoying.
I think I could tell immediately, though, when the AI was his voice, because he had such enunciation and inflection when he spoke.
Yes.
You can't mirror that.
No.
I mean, you could try, but
technology couldn't then.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
Voice
so We're gonna go through this. I have it kind of broken down in chunks,
Okay. Do
and
before we jump into it, just I do we want to just put a trigger warning?
oh yeah, guys. We're going to be talking about suicide, death by
Yeah.
suicide, suicidality, all
Intense
the things.
depression, drug
Yes,
use,
yes.
all of that. I mean, I think most people are aware that Anthony Bourdain took his own life. But they talk a lot about his depression and his
Hmm.
challenges, and just if that's not a thing you want to listen to, it's okay.
Yeah, maybe you just want to go listen to like Steph and I talk about Married at First Sight today,
Maybe you do. Or
or
maybe you
Golden
just wanna
Batch.
Golden Batch, the last episode of Golden Batch, I've listened to 3 times. Um, or maybe you just wanna go watch an episode of Parts Unknown if
Hmm.
you wanna be
Hmm.
back with Anthony Bourdain in a
Yes, there you
happier
go.
way.
There you go.
But let's talk about
I have to say, just personally, what he meant to me. Like Timmy and I started dating in 2003, and I loved Anthony Bourdain, and he loved Anthony Bourdain, and it just kind of our worlds matched.
Mhm.
Watched Parts Unknown constantly. We watched No Reservations constantly. And we always have this running joke that when I was very pregnant, he took me for my birthday to this little French restaurant by us.
Okay.
And he was, of course, talking to the waitress because he talks to everybody. And she was like, "You remind me so much of Anthony Bourdain." And to this day, it's like the highest compliment anyone's ever paid him. He whips it out all the time whenever he needs to. You know what I mean? And
That
mhm,
is a compliment of the highest order to
it
remind
is.
someone of
It
Tony
is.
Bourdain. Yeah, I loved him forever too. I don't even remember how he came into my life, but he did,
Hmm.
and loved him, and my mother and I for years, when I was single, we still did Thanksgiving and did all the things. We still made all the meal. I made all the meal. We would drink too much wine, and then CNN would always show on Thanksgiving night.
Yep.
Either it was a marathon of Parts Unknown or No
Hmm.
Reservations, and we would just sit down on the couch after we ate and just watch Anthony Bourdain all night,
Yeah. Yep.
and
And it's funny because we'll get there, but I remember very clearly when he did that cooking competition show,
mm,
that period of time where people were like, "Oh, he's selling out," but he wasn't. He was like settling down. I remember that very clearly, and Timmy and I were like, "What is he doing?"
this is a little goofy, but it's okay.
But it's okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we open with Tony's words, which is a great way to frame this. He's talking about when he dies, and he's talking to Eric, I believe.
Mhm.
And it's the France episode.
I love their friendship.
I do too. I
Yeah.
do too. And he says when he dies, he wants nothing, no fanfare, just an announcement, unless it provides entertainment. Like if he could be shot out of a cannon into a crowd or something, then he would be up for
I kinda feel the same way.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't need any
I
fanfare. I mean,
yeah,
I don't need anything, I'll be dead.
correct, correct. Now, I have two requests upon my death, and I'm committing them to tape right now.
Okay,
I am to be cremated and thrown onto a whale in California.
okay.
And I want Timmy to mourn me forever. No moving on for him. No moving on
Oh,
for him.
okay. Okay. Wow. Wow, okay. Um, if you could if you could time it, which with my mother, I can take care of both of them because
Mhm,
she wants her ashes spread in Big Sur.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I could go do both of these
I
for you
was
at the
thinking
same time.
Monterey Bay, so you could hit Monterey Bay on the way down to Big Sur. There you go.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right.
Cool.
Stephanie has already committed to renting the boat and everything, though, so you might have to take her with you.
That's fine. I think we'd have a
Okay.
good time.
Okay. All right. So it's 1999, and I've kind of chunked, like I said, the story. And this chunk is when he's writing Kitchen Confidential.
Okay.
Okay, and which is an amazing book. I mean, I highly recommend to anyone who's never read it.
I've only read parts of it, but I
Oh, it's
downloaded it the other night
mhm.
because I download the audiobooks, it's narrated by him.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know that. I might have to
Yeah.
listen to that. Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, as a writer, he is one of the biggest influences on my writing. I find that I tend to try to mimic him when I'm writing. I
Mm.
feel that he sees things the way I see things sometimes. I mean, he really just spoke to me as a writer and was a huge influence for me
Oh, I love that.
because he's in my My field is creative nonfiction, and that's what he wrote. And I
Yep.
feel like he's one of the best creative nonfiction writers out there. So I
Agreed.
love him. So he says, I just have this quote from him. It's why chefs are all drunks. It's because we don't understand why the world doesn't work like our kitchens.
Mm.
And it's 1999. There's a film crew at Tony and Nancy Bourdain's apartment in New York. He says, I've always loved language. I use language to get out of trouble.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
And
he's so quick on his feet and so
I
smart.
he's so smart. And I
So
didn't
smart.
realize like how baked into him was his love of television
Yeah, I didn't either.
and books. I mean,
Yeah.
just growing up, you know? So he says his early heroes were writers and musicians, and he describes himself as antisocial. Says he started writing in 1993, and we see him go to Joel Rose's house. Now, this is how he got his start in
Yep.
writing. And again, there's a little bit of nepotism here, guys. Okay. There just
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, Anthony Bourdain's mother was an editor. Like,
Copy
he
editor.
he came f
Hmm.
he didn't come from incredible means, but he was solidly upper middle class. Like,
But I
he had
can tell you at this time in the 90s, people were throwing money at authors to write memoirs. It was the
sure.
height of the memoir. It was when Mary Carr wrote Lit, if you remember that. Bev
Mhm.
D'Onofrio wrote Riding Cars with Boys. It was this period of time where you could get a memoir because they were just kind of coming onto the scene and
Yep.
everybody could get one.
Yeah.
So he was in Tokyo on business and he started writing Joel like a series of emails. And Joel was so impressed, he printed them out, handed them to his wife, Karen Rinaldi, who was like, she was in publishing. And she's like, here's a book deal. Like, that kind of thing. But
You
before
get a
that,
book deal, and you get a book deal. Everybody gets a book deal.
he had, and I don't know if you ever read this. I actually teach this in my creative writing class. In 1999, he had, because Kitchen Confidential comes out in the spring of 2000. So in 1999, he had a very successful article in the New Yorker, thanks to his mother,
Okay.
okay, called Don't Eat Before Reading This. A New York chef spills some trade secrets. And it's a
Oh, I've never read
great
that.
piece
I'll
in the New
I'll look it up.
Yorker. It's really good. First line: good food, good eating is all about blood and organs, cruelty and decay. It's about sodium loaded pork fat, stinky triple cream cheeses, the tender thymus glands, and distended livers of young animals. It's about danger, risking the dark bacterial forces of beef, chicken, cheese, and shellfish. It's great. It's great. And it did really well and put him on a lot of editors' radars.
Mhm.
Because
Sure.
first of all, to get a piece in the New Yorker was, you know, but he had written the piece, he had sent it to his mother to copy edit. She worked at the New York Times at the time.
Mhm.
And she did think it was great and passed it along. Like it wasn't like she was like, "Oh, just publish this because it's my son." I mean,
Right.
he was talented.
Oh, incredibly,
Yes.
incredibly.
So so that's my little writing rant. Okay.
Okay. Cool.
So, he said Karen tells us that he came up with the title Kitchen
Mhm.
Confidential, and he had 8 months to write it. And
It's so strange to me, and you can speak to this way more than I can. I've not written anything extensive in my life, but 8 months sounds so short and yet so long to write something.
I mean, I've been working on my second book for 5 years.
Right,
Yes.
I know that
Oh,
that's
yeah,
how
if
that
you get a
works.
fat advance and you have
Oh,
nothing to do but write that book,
sure.
I mean, I think he was still working as a chef at the time though.
He was still at Leal.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
don't know. How do you say it? Leal?
Leal, yeah.
Leal. So his agent is Kim Witherspoon, and she says Tony was just he was not afraid of failing. And of course, that's that boomer white man confidence.
Exactly,
He's just like, I can do anything.
that's right. Well, he
It's
earned it.
so amazing to me because I feel like at heart he is a Gen Xer.
Yeah,
He's a boomer.
he's
He was
right on
born
the
the year my mother was.
he's right on the cusp,
He's
you know?
56,
Yeah,
1956.
yeah,
And I feel like he has so many Gen X qualities. It's
agreed.
weird. Mm.
Yeah.
So the book comes out and it really tells the truth about the restaurant industry. And I wrote Don't Eat This Before Reading or Don't Eat Before Reading This comes out a year before in the New Yorker. He's the executive chef at Leal and he was a heroin addict until 1988.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have some footage of him in the kitchen. Karen tells us he was handsome and he was tall, but he was very nerdy. And I think
Yes,
that's what I love about him.
which is to me the, sexiest thing you can come up with.
Yeah.
Nerd, tall,
Yep.
little rugged looking. Mm. I can completely see why Timmy would remind someone of Anthony Bourdain.
One of our favorite episodes is when he goes to Nashville, and he's actually with that Allison Moorehart,
Yeah.
and they go to Nashville. I don't know if you've seen this episode, and they're just at this big house party, and it's like a punk band, and Timmy is in his glory. He's like, "I want to be there. I want
Why
to."
aren't I at that party?
Timmy is very into punk. I'm
Okay.
not at all.
Okay.
It's a divide between us, but Anthony Bourdain was big into punk, and I
Mhm.
think that Timmy loves that side of him. That little bit of yeah.
Anthony Bourdain would fit in perfectly at a Henry Rollins show. He'd slide right on in there.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. Yep, yep. So now we have an interview with the owner, Philippe, who says, I didn't fire him, but I had no idea it was being written. And then we see Anthony Bourdain get a call that he has a bestseller on the New York Times list.
God, yeah. What a
I, c-
dream.
I will never get that call, but I can only imagine what that call's like.
Yeah. You might get that call. You never know, girl.
Eh.
It could happen.
So we learned that he was living paycheck to paycheck. So when the opportunity came to make some money, he was ready. And this reminds me of did you ever read Stephen King's memoir?
No.
It's called On Writing. So it's half craft book and
Okay.
half memoir.
Okay.
And he talks about like he was so dirt poor. He was an English teacher in the Midwest, I think, or no, were they in Maine at the time? They might have been in Maine at the time. I feel like he was in the Midwest. I don't know why. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He was making like $14,000 a year. It was in the
Yeah.
70s. And his wife was working the donut counter overnight at the local
Man.
donut shop. He gets a call that he has sold, I think it was Carrie.
Oh,
No, it
okay.
was,
Wow.
yeah, it was Carrie for like $250,000.
Oh my God.
And when I read that, it like sends chills down my body
What a
because, like,
life-changing
just what a
experience.
life-changing thing, and Stephen King is very similar to Anthony Bourdain in that he had a brother, and they were obsessed with comics
Mm.
and adventure stories and writing, and it's so interesting how that kind of boredom in childhood breeds that creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Alright, so where are we, girl? Oh, I have just a little note about his childhood. So, he has a brother named Chris.
Mhm.
Did you ever see the New Jersey episode where him and his brother go back to the Jersey Shore where they used to spend time as kids?
Mhm. Yeah.
I always show that to my students
Mm.
in my or in my regular class, my freshmen, because two of our main feeder schools are in Jersey. So all of them are from Jersey, basically.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And I show them that, and then I have them write essays about their hometowns, and it's
Oh, I
really
love
cool.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, Chris says they loved Tintin books. Are you familiar with this?
I remember Tintin.
I don't remember. Is that like Rin Tin Tin?
Oh God, what was it? Hold on. I will Google Tintin books. I like vaguely remember this. Tintin. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, this is exactly what I think it is. It's The Adventures of Tintin is a series, 24 albums created by a Belgian cartoonist.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember
All
them.
right. So his parents were pretty normal and they
Mhm.
loved him and he rebelled against that.
Of course he did. It's so interesting. Like you look at people and you would look at someone like him that he did drugs and he was this badass and he always had like an angry edge to him and all
Yeah.
that. You'd think like,
Yeah.
wow, his childhood must have been hard. No, his childhood was totally normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean,
and his soul was to rebel against that normality.
yes. Yeah. I mean, somebody says later, and I think they have it correct. I think it's Chris, his editor or his sound or production partner. He says if there was an idea, Anthony railed against it.
Mhm.
Just because it was an idea.
Just because he could and he thought he should.
Okay. So, he was born in Manhattan. I have that his dad, Pierre, was a salesman at a New York City camera store, and he later became an executive for Columbia Records. And
Mhm.
Gladys, his mother, was a staff editor at the New York Times.
I love the name Gladys.
And do
We
you
don't
know
need people
she
named Gladys anymore.
No, you don't. It's a great
Mm-mm.
name. Do you know she outlived him, which is really sad.
The
She just
idea that
died in 2020.
a parent losing a child, it's just
I don't know how people
losing a
survive it.
child in that way.
Yeah.
God, yeah, I don't know how you survive it.
He says by 43, he thought he had had all of his grand adventures. And we see him on his book tour, like
Mhm.
not chef's tour, cook's tour, but his book tour, which looks sad and pathetic like most book tours. And we see him doing all the talk shows. Letterman, The Today Show, we see him on Oprah. We
Yeah.
see Bradley Cooper playing him in a movie. And he's like, "I hate this. I
Bradley
hate this. I
Cooper.
hate." Bradley Cooper is a national treasure. Can we talk
Oh,
about it?
we can absolutely talk about the fact that I should have gone to high school with him and married him. I was
100%.
this close to going to high school with him.
You dropped the ball. What are you doing?
No, no, mother Amanda and father Amanda dropped the ball. I didn't have the
Like
choice.
Jake and Matt always say, we could have been recording this from, like, a studio in Malibu. What
We
happened?
absolutely could have. We could have.
Jesus,
I know,
okay.
I'm sorry. Blame my parents. It's their fault.
So, he tells the camera, "When my 15 minutes of fame is up, I'll be relieved." So, we see this nugget of him starting to not be thrilled about his fame.
Yeah, yeah, it I don't know. I think about fame a lot and how
Yeah.
I really wouldn't wanna be famous.
Um, it's weird because I don't wanna be famous,
Mhm.
but I do enjoy interacting with tons of people. Like, I
I do
love
too.
interacting with people,
I do too. I
but I
love that's
also
what I love
wanna
about our little podcast group. I love that people
exactly. But I
I
also,
love
like,
that.
wanna remain anonymous in a weird way.
Yeah, I don't wanna go to the grocery store and worry about the fact that I'm in yoga pants and haven't showered today.
I don't either, and I don't think I'll ever have to worry about that.
I don't think so
But
either of us will.
but he just railed against it. He did not want this.
Mhm,
So we see that he's been, you know, this book is doing well, and this woman named Lydia calls him up and she's like, "Let's make this book a show.
mhm.
So we're gonna do Cook's Tour, and you're gonna travel the world and you're gonna talk about blah blah blah." So Um, Chris and Lydia go up to
Mm.
Lay Hall,
Leal.
and they shoot a demo.
Mm.
And they quickly realize he has never traveled anywhere. This is me, I am him, and this
It's
is
so
part of why
nuts
I
to
love
think
him.
about. It's so
Mhm,
nuts to think about
mhm.
that he had never been anywhere.
Part of why I love him so much is the success that he had came in later life. However, I don't wanna he had great success as a chef. I don't
Yes.
wanna downplay that.
Yeah,
But
you
the
don't get to be
success
executive chef of Leal.
right.
Randos don't get that job.
But the success that he had as a writer came later,
Yes,
and I like
correct.
that. Okay. So they realize he's never traveled, that his travels were all in his head, Lydia says.
Mm.
And his view of the world, she says, emanate from books and film. And this is where we get a little bit of he's obsessed with The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad.
Right, which
Like
wow.
really obsessed with. Also, very similar to Amy Archer, very obsessed with Vietnam.
Yeah.
Very obsessed with it. I'm totally obsessed with Vietnam.
Is that your Roman Empire?
I think it is. I think about it a lot. I really do. So, and we'll get to why when we get to
Yeah,
the depression suicide area later. Okay.
yeah.
So Chris says our first leg of this was 6 weeks and we didn't know each other. And Tony was very unsure of what was going to happen. And he and Lydia had just gotten married and they were taking Tony along for the ride.
Mhm.
And they just didn't know what they were doing. And he's like, Tony's awkward. He's very shy. He's introverted. Like, not many people know that about him. And Lydia says he can be a huge pain in the ass sometimes.
Oh, I'm sure he was a huge pain in the ass a lot of times.
Many times.
So strange to think though that he was introverted and shy.
I know.
That's not what he portrays on his shows at all. He portrays a very deep comfort in all sorts of situations with all sorts of people and his ability to connect with people.
Yeah.
But I, I mean, I'm an introvert as well. Like I'm what I call a social introvert. I think there's always this assumption that if you're more introverted, you don't like people, you don't want to socialize. It's like, no, I want to, but then I also need that time to come back and recharge.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I go back and forth on me because for many years I thought I was an extrovert. For many,
Mhm.
many years. But that is changing as I'm getting older. Like I'm wanting to spend more and more time in my house,
Mhm.
just by myself.
I've taken the Myers-Briggs twice, like the official version versus some like BuzzFeed quiz.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one time I was, like, right on the edge of the introvert, and one time I was right on the edge of the extrovert. So I do think I'm really a true ambivert. I think it really depends on my mood of answering the questions that day,
Yeah.
which side is gonna come out. Like, I think if I'm peopled out, I probably show up more introverted.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So but I do
There
get
is
peopled out. I
there is
absolutely get peopled
nothing
out.
more that I love than hearing somebody's story.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a restaurant situation or a bar situation, I'm talking to somebody and we're talking about a story, I'm in. All
Mhm.
in. So I guess as I get older, I'm preferring more one-on-one contact. Like that's what I love about this podcast is us just talking.
Yep,
I'm getting to know
exactly.
you, you're getting to know me, we're talking about something else. You know what I mean? Like I love it.
Absolutely.
I
I
love
love
it.
sharing our stories.
Me
And
too.
that's one of the reasons I love listening to podcasts, because I love listening to other people's stories.
Yes.
You
Same,
know,
same.
when
Mhm.
Matt and Jake are talking about 90 Day Fiancé, yes, I'm interested to what they say about that, but I'm just as much interested in the Oklahoma stories and Mother Poodle and all of that.
Yes.
That is
Agreed.
just, if not more entertaining to me.
Agreed.
So,
So Tony is all closed up and being a pain in the ass, but then they go to Vietnam, and that's when things start getting a little better. The owner of Le Hall, Philippe, joins
mhm.
them, and that helped. And Philippe says Tony loved Apocalypse Now. Never saw it.
I never saw it either.
Okay, I thought you were going to come for me. Never
No,
saw
no, I never
it
saw it either. I mean, I've seen
because
scenes from it, but I've never seen the whole thing, and all I know is it has my beloved Martin Sheen in it.
I don't watch war movies. More on that to come later. Okay.
Okay.
So, he loved Apocalypse Now and he loved Vietnam. And Philippe says, I did too. We were both like really into Vietnam. I don't know what's going on here.
I would love to go to Vietnam.
Me too.
It's high on my list.
And he says, we see Tony starting to take a little bit of creative liberty and he's starting to love it. And we see footage of him like kind of directing now.
Mhm.
And Chris says, this is the story, Tony. It's not you being a travel guide, it's you being open to things and being the audience and walking through and experiencing things. And
That's
he
what I love
nailed it.
about it.
Yep.
That's what I loved about watching him is he would just show up and these things would happen. And yes, he was the star of the show, but he never made himself the center of the story.
No, no, never. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I was thinking about him. Did you watch the latest 90 Day the other way?
Yes.
I was thinking about him when Brandan takes his mother to try street food because
Oh,
Tony
yeah.
always was a big street food person.
Always a street food. Yeah,
Yes. Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
And his mother, I mean,
She
uh,
did well. She
she
was
did
the
really
hero in
well.
this episode.
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
I'm really team Mother Brandan.
Me too. So Chris, no, I have that right. Oh, we get this interview of Tony saying, "My rent is paid." That they're like, "What are you gonna buy with all this money?" He's like, "My rent is paid. That's all I need. I don't
Mhm.
need anything spectacular." And he never did live high off the hog.
Extravagantly.
No.
No.
Mm-mm. Now we meet Eric, and I don't know how to say his last name. Is it Repair?
Yeah,
Because it's
repair.
French, right?
Yeah.
So Eric Repair, so a famous chef in Manhattan. He invites Tony to come to his restaurant. Tony is gobsmacked. His gob is smacked
His gob
because
has been smacked.
he loved Eric. It was one of his idols.
Yeah.
So they go there, and Eric says, I was stunned by him. He was articulate, well mannered, and we met again. And Eric said we kept meeting and we became good friends. And Tony really struggled with staying real and being the host of a TV show.
Mm, yeah.
Hmm.
I think he struggled with staying real in himself.
The thing that always perplexed me about him, and Timmy and I talked about this a lot as we were watching it. For an addict, he really drank a lot, and that was worrisome to me. I was like
Mhm.
I could see that his addiction was in other things. Obviously,
Oh,
we couldn't see behind the scenes. I didn't know what was happening there.
sure. No, he lives an addict's life. He's addicted to travel, he's addicted to adventure, he's addicted to booze, he's addicted to drama. He was always finding his addiction. And I think it gets talked about later in it with um his friend who's the artist, was his name
Josh. Oh, David
Josh
Cho.
David Cho. That he was, and David Cho's like, "I'm an addict too. It's not drugs. I'm addicted to everything else on the planet."
Yeah.
And I think Tony was too, and I think what he was is really addicted to trying to figure out how to feel better.
Yeah, because when you think about somebody who had a pretty quote unquote normal upbringing, okay?
Mhm.
And again, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but according to Tony,
Yeah.
it was safe and healthy and fine.
His parents loved him. He
Mhm.
had a decent relationship with his brother, like, just normal.
I wonder if there was a sense of, I want more. I want
Mm.
more than this, and
Yeah,
feeling guilty for that, and
maybe.
mistaking that for being broken. Like, why am I not content with this? I must be broken.
Why is all of this not enough?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have the friendship with, okay. So Chris tells us at this time, his brother's also named Chris. When I say his brother, I say brother Chris. Okay.
Okay.
Other Chris is TV Chris,
TV Chris,
who
yeah.
I love. I
I
think
love him
him
too.
and Lydia are great.
Yeah.
Chris says part of Tony's shtick at this point was that he would also, like, part of the pitch to the network was that he would also eat bizarre things.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
Hmm. And he
He's
said,
willing to put anything in his mouth.
oh, yeah, he ate a beating cobra heart.
I know. The man had no fear. That's the part of him I do not identify with. I have fear
Me too,
of
but
food.
remember that he always said that you never, and who was on 90 Day who went down and freaked out because they ate a pig?
That
The
would
guy
be
who's dead now. Oh, he's
Larry.
not dead. I
No,
thought, okay.
Jason's dead.
Jason's dead.
Jason Cassia. Larry and Jenny,
Yeah.
when he had to eat the pig.
You don't insult somebody's culture. If they give
Yep.
you a live beating cobra heart, you eat it. That's what Tony Bourdain believed.
Uh, then
Whether or not Amy Archer could do that, I don't know.
I'm gonna then continue to to not put myself in positions where someone's going to offer me a live cobra heart. Just I don't think I could do that.
I have eaten things like chicken livers, chicken, like
Yeah.
lame stuff like that. I could not eat something that was beating.
No.
And then he goes, "Oh, it was pulsating down my
Oh
gullet."
god, I
I was
know. I
like,
know.
"Wow, dude."
God.
I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of badass.
It
Kind of
was
hot.
very badass. It's kinda sexy, and also I kind of wanna throw up. Both
Yes.
of these things are existing in the same space.
Throughout this entire movie, I was like, "He's kinda hot. This is hot. That's hot.
Oh,
This is hot."
I texted you. God, he is so sexy. Everything about him was
I
sexy.
know. I know. So, he says that, Lydia and Chris wrote the voiceover at first,
Mhm.
and Tony would come in and be like, "What is this shit?" And he would
This
be
isn't my
rewriting it.
voice.
And pretty soon, he'd be writing the voiceover that we all know and love so
Mhm.
much. And he says he saw it as an extension of himself, and it had to be his voice.
Yeah,
So he's on the road for 2 years. He stopped working as a chef. His marriage fell apart. They were together for almost 30 years.
that's nuts.
Somebody says, I don't have who said it, maybe Chris, maybe Eric, I'm not sure. Tony was a traditional romantic. He honestly believed that you could marry somebody from high school and stay together the entire time.
Which is lovely.
It is, it really is. So Lydia says, Tony and Nancy were like Sid and Nancy. It was like a love born out of rebellion.
Mm.
And brother Chris says Nancy had no interest in fame, and this was Tony's life now. She probably was happy for that in the divorce settlement.
I'm I'm gonna guess, given how they started out as young, whippersnappers taking on the world, the divorce probably worked out well for her
Yeah.
financially. Maybe not
He
emotionally, but financially.
his voiceover says, "I cruelly burned down my previous life in its totality." All right. So now we go to the era is 2005, 2012, no reservations.
Yeah.
So, and that was on the Travel Channel, if you remember. Favorite not no reservations episode is when they are in, I want to say Colombia. It is Colombia.
Colombia.
And Colombia. And a bunch of people, the police, whatever, take him to this field where they destroy cocaine. So they're like, just there's tons of cocaine all over this field. And
Which is exactly where Tony Bourdain should
it's
be.
all on these big like blankets and stuff. And he goes, "This looks like my bedspread in the 70s." Thought that was pretty good. Hmm.
That's
I love him. All right.
oh god.
So 2006, they're in Beirut and war breaks out. Tony is super frustrated because they're sitting around a pool getting tan, he says, and we're watching a war.
Yeah.
and he's not happy. He's very upset right now. He did not want the episode to air. He said he didn't want to exploit the situation that was happening, and the Travel Channel disagreed.
And they did it, yeah.
So Tony wrote a pretty dark ending, and I wrote down what he said. The dinner table is. I used to believe the dinner table was the great leveler. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe everybody, the good and the bad, are all together and all crushed under the same terrible wheel.
Mm,
Hmm.
yikes.
And this was a turning point for him. And this is something that I kind of want to talk about. Like, I feel that this is what happened to me when I was doing all that work on the gun book.
Okay.
Like, you just get to this point where you're like, so I was, every day talking to school parents who lost kids in school shootings. I mean, Sandy Hook parents,
Mhm.
Columbine people. I mean, Parkland. And it just gets to be so much,
Yeah.
and you don't realize the effects it's taking on your health, on your marriage, on your home life, you know what
Sure.
I mean? And eventually, like, I just had to completely shut myself out of it. Like, I stopped doing all my advocacy work, I stopped watching the news, I stopped listening, like, I just had to get into this protective
Mhm.
bubble where
Mhm.
I just had to breathe a little bit, and
Absolutely.
I feel like I get where he's coming from. He's starting to see that there's these problems in the world. And I
Yeah.
feel the same way. Like, I always tell my therapist, I am walking around with devastating information inside of me. I know things about these kids and these parents and these shootings that
Mm.
I've never told anyone, because it's
Yeah.
like handing someone a bomb. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, I have all of this in me, and it just changes how I see the world now. Like, I
Of
just
course.
see the world differently.
Of course.
And I
How
see it
could you not?
as right. I see it as, like, I'm more jaded than I ever was.
Sure.
I see it as terrible a lot of times, and it's sad because I never used to be like that. And when
Even
they talked about this turning point for him, I was like, I can relate to that.
yeah, you immerse yourself in evil or something that's very emotionally taxing and you can't not be changed. I mean, this is not even the same level of what you're talking about with the gun violence interviews and research and work that you've done. But in 2020, I used to be a constant news watcher. I had MSNBC
Me
on
too.
24/7, 365.
Yep.
If it wasn't that, I was watching The West Wing. This is
Yep.
what I did every day.
Mhm. I loved
And
politics and I loved the
yes,
news. Yes.
and it hit a point probably in like April of 2020 between the state of US politics, between COVID, between the US response to COVID, between the worldwide response, between being unemployed and isolated. I realized one day I had to turn this off
Mhm.
because every moment of my psyche was being taken up by how awful everything is.
Yes.
And you can't live in that.
And then what I've become is a magnet for gun violence stories. So, like, a shooting breaks out and my phone is blowing up.
Uh,
Everybody's sending it to me.
I bet.
Everybody, and I don't wanna say, like, I feel there's immense privilege, right, in being able
Mhm.
to shut it off,
Yeah,
because there's communities who live in fear of gun violence every day.
absolutely.
Um, but, I mean, I have kids to raise too, and I just had to reach a point where I was like, "I can't live like this anymore," and the news
No.
was a big part of it.
Yeah, and you can't live like that anymore because then at some point you can't let your daughters leave the house because you
Right.
can't because you're terrified at every moment and no one can live that way. And Tony Bourdain was someone who walked into a lot of treacherous and scary situations.
And devastating poverty and
Devastating
inequality and
yeah.
yeah.
And I think the rebellious man in him was radically egalitarian.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say, like, he had an enormous moral compass,
Mhm.
similar to Nat in Yellow Jackets, like, how we talk about her.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know it's weird, but, like, sometimes these people who seem like the biggest rebels are really, really dedicated to social justice.
Yes.
and to equal to equality for everybody, you know, and
Mhm.
really guided by an intense set of morals
Of
and
right and wrong.
principles. Yes.
And it may not be the same one that you and I operate by.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be, but for him, just like for Natalie on Yellow Jackets, in his brain, in her brain, it's very clear what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And we operate from that position all of the time.
Yeah, and I think that him coming into these communities with the television crew and production felt icky to him.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
These people haven't or don't have clean water and don't,
Mhm.
all of these things. And he's like, look at me, the rich American dude with my big TV crew
Mhm.
here. So even if this is a dangerous place, I'm pretty much guaranteed to be okay because I got me a film crew with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yep.
so interesting. So
So
interesting.
we see now that in 2007 he meets Octavia, his second wife. She worked for Eric. Tony became smitten with her. She's a strong Italian woman.
Yeah, I love her.
I love her too. And, you know, she gets pregnant. And Tony voiceover says, "For most of my life, I would not have been a good father, but, you know, I'm at a place where I
Mm,
can do it now."
yeah.
And Octavia, I always write Octavia. Octavia says any fear she had dissipated when he was so excited to be a father to Ariane, I think is their
Mhm.
daughter's name. And we have some great home videos. We see Anthony playing a character on Yo Gabba Gabba.
So super cute.
He's on The Simpsons. We see him doing tours, and this is the time when he was on that cooking reality show. Timmy and I were
Right.
like, "What is happening?"
He's trying to settle down and be able to be home every night.
And I think he's trying to make some steady income, you know,
Yeah.
and be yeah. So, now we have David Cho, and David Cho, there's a little problem with him.
Okay. I don't know much about him.
He's a wildly talented artist. We see
Okay.
that painting he
Yes.
did of Anthony Bourdain. I want it. How do I get that? I don't know.
Yeah.
He made a joke about rape and
Ooh.
then, like, tried to pedal a bunch of times. So, like, I don't know how I feel about him. You
Okay.
know what I mean? But in terms of him talking about this, that's fine. I feel like he really wanted to center himself in Tony's life as more important than he might have been,
I think so too.
but, you know, who am I to say?
But I mean, I also think they really understood each other in
Sure.
a tortured artist way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he tells us that Tony was beginning to settle into being famous. We see them talking on an episode of No Reservations. We see a montage of Tony traveling. Now we meet Tom Vitale, the director. He's telling us that Tony was a control freak. You could not win an argument. If an idea existed, he challenged it just because he could.
Yeah.
And he
I
says, Tony's,
I wouldn't want to live with that, but I love it.
I love it too. I would not want
Yeah.
to live with it.
Yeah.
Tony's bullshit detector was intense.
Oh, I'm sure.
And when he wanted to leave, he wanted to leave. And then we get the best footage of the entire thing, which is the mime. Remember the
Yes.
mime?
Yes.
So Tony's like, that mime better not fucking come over here. Get the fuck away from me. And the mime's coming over. He's just like freaking out.
Oh,
And then
mimes freak me out.
he gets up and he's like, this is too fucked up. I'm out of here. This is too fucked up.
The mime, this man's done
hmm
heroin, but the mime, that's too
hmm
fucked up.
hmm Hey everyone, stay tuned. Little Miss Recap will be right back after these words. So we see his crew comes in. His crew is very dedicated to him. He
Mhm.
had the same people around him for many, many years. Um Tom says Tony was a countercultural voice. Every country we went to was still dealing with the fallout of something America had done.
Mhm.
And we see him in Laos and he's talking with people who've been bombed and he tells them, this is the least I could do. So one guy that he's talking to is like kind of crying.
Yeah.
And he says, this is the least I could do. Every American should see the results of our war. So he says to him. And we see
Yeah.
him getting more political and
And
more,
I'd
and
never
this is what I'm talking about. He's getting more and more worked up
yeah.
over shit.
I had never thought about the fact that he deliberately went to places that the US screwed up.
I don't think there's many places you can go that
No,
they haven't.
I haven't. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, for sure.
Yeah. Especially like he loved Southeast Asia.
Mhm.
You know what I
And those
mean?
are some of
So,
my favorite episodes of his.
yes. Yep.
That and the Middle East. Like the
Yeah.
episode that he did in Palestine.
I don't remember that one. I have to go
Israel and
back and watch it.
Palestine was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember when he was in Vietnam and Obama came to see him,
Oh, I know, in
and they had
Hanoi, and they
dinner.
shared a hot
Mhm,
dog and a
mhm.
beer and
Yep.
mm. Those
So
2 at a table. Oh, if I saw the 2 of them at a table,
oh my god, I
holy
would
crap.
die. I would
Yeah,
die. I would die. Just kill me right there. I've
yeah.
lived out my
I've
dream.
lived. It's all good.
So we see him trying to give a village some leftover food that they had, and it gets really ugly because these
Mhm.
people are living in desperate poverty and they're pushing each
Right.
other out of the way. And David Cho says Tony began to see suffering in this world and it really changed how he saw things.
Yeah.
He was traveling 250 days a year at this point. And the time he did spend with Ariane, he was very, very attentive. Lydia said, fatherhood changed him. He never experienced a love like that.
Well,
Now we
that's
see
parenthood.
Josh. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we do see an interview with Tony where he's saying he's the happiest standing in the backyard being a dad.
I love that.
And Tom says, as much as Tony loved being home, he loved leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Josh, now we see Josh home. He is a friend and a musician, and they really bonded because Josh had a young daughter as well. And
Mhm.
he was on the road a lot too. And I think he was in the Nashville episode
I think
with
so too.
Allison Moorhart.
Yeah.
So they both traveled and they talk, and Tony says, I love being home, but within a week I feel like I'm going stir crazy. Josh says Tony was the great American storyteller, and it was amazing to watch him pick up influence everywhere he went. Now we see him in the Congo, and we see them taking a real sketchy flight in the Congo. And Tom Vitale says it was probably the most dangerous place they had ever filmed. And Tony was really into Heart of Darkness, like really into that novel.
It's an
And
interesting I mean, it says a
it's
lot
really
about him that that's
interesting.
the one he
Yes.
that the novel he's into.
And Chris says Tony was pushing himself towards an understanding of apocalypse now. This gets a little weird.
Yeah,
And we see
yeah.
the episode like Tony's kind of acting it out and talking about it. And we see him like kind of killing things in the Congo like animals, like hunting. And it's kind of meant for us to see this is a new
A new
turn
version,
that he's
yeah.
taking. So now we're at Parts Unknown 2013 to 2018. We see press for the new show on CNN, including Anderson Cooper, fawning over him. Love Anderson Cooper.
Okay, that's another 2 men. Put those 2 men together,
Yep.
and I'm dying a happy person.
And then Anthony Bourdain had won a Peabody. He won several Emmys. I didn't realize he won a Peabody. That's huge.
Yeah.
Eric says he was a journalist and he was political, but he was a storyteller and he didn't realize how political he was. And Tony voiceover says, we only see Africa and countries like it when bad things happen.
So true.
And David Cho says it was never about food. It was about Tony searching to become a better person. And David says Tony was really fucking dark, man. Really dark. Like, I don't think people knew how dark he was. No, we knew.
Yeah, we knew,
That
but
was
it's
part of
so
the charm.
yeah, but I don't think we really understood just how dark his own personal darkness was. Um, I think I think for a lot of people like him, particularly people who wind up taking their own lives in that way, they're constantly feeling like they need to figure out how to be a better person.
Yeah.
And he was an extraordinary person
Yeah.
and he didn't know it. Now, I'm not sure I'd want to be married to him. I don't think he'd probably be an easy person to be married to. I don't
Silence
know.
over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to really think about that because I think that I don't know, like he just loved so intensely. I feel like you would definitely feel loved by him, but you're right. I think that you would be something he like whoever he was married to would be something he would lose interest in, as we
Mhm.
see.
Yeah.
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 And he was probably extremely difficult. You're right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think living
Mhm.
with him would have been
Mhm.
extremely difficult because I think he's very particular and peculiar.
Mhm. Mhm. So
Yeah.
now we see him in Provincetown. Did you ever see that episode where he does Cape Cod in Provincetown?
Yeah, I'll have to watch it.
Um, Timmy and I, everywhere we go, we watch the episode he does there. So
Yeah,
that we
we
could
try to do
see
that
yeah,
too.
so when we were going to Cape Cod, we watched it, so it was pretty recently. And, he talks about his heroin use
Yeah.
there. It was when it was really bad. David Cho says he never dealt with the issues that put him down the dark road as a junkie. And Tony voiceover says, Something was missing in me, and part of me wanted to be a dope fiend. I thought about it as being an artist.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting. He's like, "Yeah, the first time I shot up heroin, I looked at myself and I was like, 'Yes, this is what I'm supposed to do.'"
Mhm,
Almost
mhm.
like he it's almost like he thought he had to take on the framework of tortured artist,
Yeah,
or he wasn't a
yeah,
true artist.
yeah.
And the question becomes, was he truly that tortured,
Mhm.
or did he feel like you had to put it on in order to do good work?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
yeah, I mean, I believe a lot of his idols were tortured artists.
Mhm. Absolutely.
We see him with
And
Iggy Pop at some point, by the way.
I
Did
know.
you see that?
I love that with Iggy Pop. I I just found it interesting that David Cho's like, "You're the only person I know who quit heroin cold turkey."
Yep. Yeah, and he says Tony says, "I saw myself as somebody worth saving."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh god, yes, you
Do
are.
you
You
think
were.
do you think it was something like, "I'm gonna quit heroin cold turkey because I can"? Like, do you think it was he had not the arrogance or the hubris, but do you think he knew he had control over his drug habit? Like, who has control over their drug habit?
Right.
Nobody.
No,
But, like,
no,
he
I
kinda did.
he kinda did,
He chose
or
to
he
start it, and he chose to end
just
it.
yeah, it's interesting because, we laugh and joke a lot about Love After Lockup, but truly it's a story of the drug
It's
epidemic in this country.
according to what's his name? Brittany and
Marcelino?
Marcelino. Marcelino said it was a documentary about recidivism.
And he's
And
not
it
wrong.
is. It
It
is.
absolutely is a
Yes.
documentary about
Yes.
recidivism and the impact of addiction,
Yes.
and yeah, it's oh gosh.
Mhm. So, David says Tony's addiction jumped from thing to thing.
Mhm.
He threw himself into things completely. I have a little bit of this in me. Like, if
I do
I
too.
like something, I just go balls to the wall.
Same. If
Yeah.
I and it could be as something as like food. I'm gonna
Yeah.
eat this thing for the next 7 weeks till I
Mhm.
can't
Mhm.
stand it anymore.
Yep. So we see him getting into jujitsu,
Mm.
and Octavia was a jujitsu fighter, and she got Tony into it. He quit smoking. He got healthy. I
He
remember
looked
that period.
I do
He
too,
looked
and
great.
he looked
Hmm.
fantastic. I mean, he still looked chiseled and rugged, but he looked clean, clear-eyed,
I love
clear-faced.
chiseled and rugged.
I do too. Uh, and I thought it was interesting that the reason Octavia did it, she's like, "I wanna be able to kill anybody who gets near my daughter."
I love her.
I love her too. Yeah.
So everyone in his life says he became insufferably obsessed with jujitsu. And Tony says he always had a timeline. Oh, Tom says Tony always had a timeline. I don't think there was anything that would have lasted forever in his life.
Yeah.
So now Octavia says, we lived like strangers and he wanted an ordinary life, but after a while he didn't want that anymore. And she says they were living separately for quite some time. Their romantic love had dissipated, but they were good friends and their focus was their daughter. Kim, his agent, says the loss of that love left him incredibly vulnerable. So they split up in 2016. David Cho has an email that Tony sent him that is haunting. He says, "My
Yeah.
life is sort of shit now. I'm successful, you're successful, but are you happy?"
That's heartbreaking. And
Mhm.
just the imagery that they used as they did that voiceover of him
Mhm.
sitting on this gorgeous wall somewhere in Italy with a
Yeah.
glass of wine and just I think that was a huge part of it for him. He was sitting in all of these amazing places, living this amazing life, and he's like, "It's not enough. Why aren't I happy?"
Well, and he doesn't have anyone to share it with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we see him doing therapy in one episode, and he's telling the therapist that he has a manic personality. He said, "One day I'm fine, and one little thing sets me off. I have fantasies of hurting other people or myself. I'd like to be able to be calmer and to relax." So we see that, and in the opening scene, we see him talking about suicide with
Mhm.
Eric. Like
Yeah.
he's always talked about it.
It's always been a part of him.
Hmm.
I wonder from this just little snippet, and I don't wanna diagnose people at all. I wonder if he had bipolar disorder.
Maybe. I don't know enough about it, but
I
maybe.
mean, just the fact that he described himself as manic and the swings and
Mhm.
his hyper focus on things and his
Yeah.
deep depression. I don't know. It would explain a lot about him
I think too, like,
if that were true, but I don't
this
wanna
is
diagnose anybody. I don't know.
this is part of the reason I was always very like, I act like he was my brother. I was very
Right?
concerned about his drinking
Yeah.
because it's such a depressant,
Yeah,
and it's not
absolutely.
good for somebody who's prone to depression.
Correct. He's already
Yeah.
depressed and
Yep.
he's doing all that.
So, now Allison Mossart comes in, and she's the friend from the Nashville episode, and she said they became pen pals for years. And she said he was searching for something clearly, and it tortured him. And we see him with Iggy Pop, and he asks Iggy, "What thrills you?" And Iggy says, "Being loved." Oh,
Same with
Leo.
Leo. Leo also is thrilled by being loved.
So now we're in Rome, and he meets Asia,
Uh-huh.
and he's taken with her immediately.
Which
And
how could you not be?
I know,
God.
Octavia says, "I was happy for him." And he had told Octavia that Asia was very insecure of their relationship. So please stop posting pics of you and I on social media. How dare you? How dare you?
Yeah,
Asia, first of all, the age difference is quite pronounced,
quite
right?
pronounced. And I mean, if Todd's ex-wife were posting photos, I mean, she reposts stuff of their child's adventures. Like when memories come up,
Yeah.
she reposts all that stuff. She's not posting new stuff because there just isn't any new stuff.
Right.
But like, I'm never bothered by that.
No.
That
No.
was their life. They
Especially
had a
if
history.
especially if he's famous.
Right,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? And she no, I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
So Alison Mosshart says he referred to Ozzy as the crazy Italian actress in emails, and he predicted that it was going to end very, very badly between them.
Yeah.
Lydia says his last relationship had extremes at its center, and it was inevitable that it would end. And Josh, his musician friend, says he was looking for something feral and wild. Now we see, by all accounts, that he was starting to become agoraphobic.
Mhm.
And it seemed like he was about to go on to something else, but I don't know. I don't know who said that and why I wrote it in there, but whatever. They started doing more isolated shows because he really couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. So they started going to these like very small villages and stuff and more
Mhm.
off the grid stuff. Tony said that
Imagine being agoraphobic and everywhere you go, someone's recognizing you.
no, no,
Oh god,
no.
that would just be off. No wonder he didn't wanna leave his house. I
Mhm.
wouldn't wanna leave my house either.
Tom says in an ideal world, Tony always said he wouldn't be in the show. It would
Mhm.
just be his voice, his guiding, but he would not be a character in the show. Lydia says a few years back, Tony asked to see Chris and Lydia at a bar and he broke up with them. He essentially said, "I can't do this anymore. I'm not doing it anymore." And Lydia says, "I was super supportive." And I was like, "That's fine, dude. Do what you have to do for you. Move to Italy. Go be
Mhm.
with Asia," because that's what he wanted. And he froze and couldn't do it.
So sad.
Then
God.
we see this Hong Kong nightmare.
Jesus.
They're in Hong Kong and Michael gets sick, the director. Tony thinks Ozzy should direct this episode. The crew's like, okay."
Okay.
But it wasn't good. We see,
No.
like, Tony having a very intense conversation with this gentleman, and she's, like, breaking the
Mhm.
the
To
conversation
reset
up
the
to, like,
scene and
reset the scene, and it's
it
crazy.
ruins it. It ruins the whole thing.
And both Chris and Lydia are like, "Tony would have flipped the fuck out on us if we did that. Like, you
Mhm.
don't do that."
Mhm.
So it's a disaster. And Chris says, "We're just trying to help our friend out. And if that meant doing," and then he starts to cry and he can't continue the interview. Tony says it was the highlight of his creative career and he was happy. Okay, now we have a downturn. The downturn is the last
Yeah.
section here.
Yeah.
Zach was a cinematographer for 12 years. Tony loved him, but he butted heads with Ozzy, so Tony fired him. And Chris says the last year was manic. The highs were high, the lows were really, really ugly. Octavia says he was not the same person, but he started going to therapy, and I thought I could stop worrying about him.
Yeah.
And she starts to cry and says, "I will always worry. I will always wonder if I should have kept more of an eye on him."
Yeah.
That's very upsetting to me.
That's incredibly upsetting, and the fact that she's like, "After this, I'm never talking about this again.
Yeah.
I can't talk about this anymore." I
Yeah.
mean, even though they divorced, she so very clearly loved him and
Mhm.
cared deeply for him.
Mhm.
And even if she didn't care for him, it's the father of her child,
Yeah.
and he loved his kid.
Yeah.
That was the thing that shocked me is when he did take his own life, to be like, "But you were so in love with your daughter."
But you're just not thinking about that.
Well, no, we
It's
can
not
talk
a
about that.
logical decision. Yeah.
Oh, as
Yeah.
someone who has tried to commit suicide, it is not a
Yeah.
logical
It's
decision.
not a logical decision. You're in such a
No.
dark place. I mean, it's but I so how do I say this without giving too much information? Somebody I know in my life,
Mhm,
I was in this position where I was worried about them
mhm.
constantly. And I became so obsessed with that idea of what would it feel like if somebody did that and you felt blame
Yeah.
that I wrote my whole second book about that. It's a fiction novel, but it's all about that. That's the book
Okay,
I'm working on.
got
and
it.
and like how do you come to terms with that? And how do
Right.
you like at what point does our responsibility for another human being end? And what
Mhm.
point does it begin? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, and we can't if someone wants to take their own life, you can't stop them. I mean, if they're
Mm-mm.
bound and determined to do it, it is next to impossible to stop them.
You can watch for signs, you
Sure.
can try to get them help, but
But
it's not your it's not
no.
your responsibility. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. It's
Yep.
not you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's so hard.
I know. So, we see footage of him and Asia, and Kim, his agent, says his love for her was safe and pure, and he needed that from her in return, and he didn't get it.
Yeah.
Now we see him on The Daily Show, and he's talking about Asia and the Me Too movement. I remember this too.
I do too.
Asia had been one of the first victims of Harvey Weinstein who came out.
Yes.
And Tony really stood by her, and she goes to the Cannes Film Festival, and she's on stage, and she's saying that Harvey Weinstein raped her in 1997 at a Cannes Film Festival, and it is a breeding ground for predators, and
Yeah.
she just, like, takes them down.
She gets up on the stage and she's like, "I'm burning this all to the ground. Fuck all you people." Which
Now
I don't blame her.
now, here's
Yes.
the problem.
Talk to me.
Asia has had her own Me Too situation,
Mhm.
where she was accused of having sex with someone who was underage and assaulting him,
Mhm.
and, she denied it. Tony paid him hush money, $400,000, and later, video surfaced of her having sex with him. Like, she claimed that she'd
Right.
never had sex with him, blah, 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 but now she has pretty much had to say, "Okay, I did, but I didn't know he was underage," or something like that. So,
Right.
she's
It's
a
not
little
good.
problematic in her own way.
Sure.
Mhm. Okay, I don't wanna say Harvey Weinstein is
Oh,
not
no.
a monster. He's a monster,
Harvey Weinstein
and
is
what
one of the
happened to
most
her was
horrible,
terrible.
horrible. We've said this a million times. Horrible things can happen to people and people can do horrible things. One does not mean the other isn't true.
Thank you, yes,
It can both happen. It
yes.
does all the time.
Mhm. So, now Octavia says, "At first, it was very noble of him to get wrapped up in this cause, but then he became obsessed with it and started cutting people out of his life, and his addiction turned to Asia." And Lydia says, "You don't want his legacy to be someone who succumbed to the darkness. He created something so important, and that is his legacy." And she breaks down sobbing. Um, so now we go to France, the final episode. The
Yeah.
final, yeah.
Final time.
Eric is interviewed and says he doesn't speak about it. He doesn't want to talk about it.
I don't blame
And
him.
by all accounts, the scenes between Tony and Eric are lighthearted and normal.
Mhm.
And 4 days in, Tony gets there and he's angry, and the scene gets dark and they start talking about death. Tabloid shit comes out about Asia and Hugo Clement, who I don't know this guy. Tony's on a balcony and he's smoking, and Michael Steed, one of the directors, goes out to him and asks how he is, and Tony pauses and says, "A little fucking discretion. I don't want to have to fucking deal with this." And he's talking about the tabloid story.
Yeah.
And his friends say he's been talking a lot about ending his life. Helen Cho says if you look at his last Instagram story, He played music from Violent City, a movie in the 70s about a couple and paparazzi photos, and it's a revenge film. A woman betrays him and he seeks his revenge. Michael Steed says, I'm very cautious about blaming someone else. Tony killed himself. He did
Mhm.
it. And I agree with
Absolutely.
that.
I do too.
Mhm.
I think his relationship with Azia didn't help him,
Mhm.
but he wanted to die himself. I don't blame. Yeah, it's so hard.
So brother Chris says, "My brother committed suicide. If someone else had been there in the room with him, it would have been murder. He was
Mhm,
just in a dark rage." And we learned that the toxicology report is clean and
mhm.
he was sober. And David Cho says he let me down and he starts to sob. And Allison Mosshart says he wasn't cruel, but there was a cruelty to this.
Yeah,
So,
there is, but again, I understand it. Like I said, I was suicidal when I was 12 years old,
mhm,
and I truly, honestly believed that taking my own life was the best thing for everybody.
yeah,
I really believe that. I believe my parents would be happier. Like, you get into that space, and when people get really angry at people who commit suicide or take their own life, and I know we're not supposed to say commit suicide
right. Die
anymore,
by suicide.
die by suicide. Um, they get angry at them, and I understand why they do, because it
Yeah,
feels selfish from the outside.
yeah.
But what I always say to people is when you're in it, you feel like you're being as selfless as possible.
Right, because I understand that. I myself
Yeah.
have dealt with this as a teenager, and
Mhm.
you feel like it is a selfless act
Mhm.
because everybody around you is suffering because you're alive. Like, that's how
Because you're
you
alive, because you're
feel.
so terrible and
Yes. Yes.
you've made a mess of so many stuff. I mean, I don't know how at 12 years old I thought I'd messed up everyone's life to such a degree, but I did.
But that is the teenage brain.
That is the teenage
You
brain
know, I
riddled
deal
with depression.
I deal with this with my girls all the time. I'm always telling them and this is something my dad used to say to me when I was growing up that I really have grown to appreciate as I got older. He
Mhm.
would always say to me, there is nothing we can't fix. There's
Yes.
nothing we can't get out of. There's
Yep.
nothing we can't fix. I say it to my girls all the time because I remember being in a situation where I thought, there's no way out of this.
Yes.
And it was so stupid. It was something so stupid.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
to 13 and 14-year-old Amy, like, that was huge. It was
Yeah.
everything.
I was being bullied all day, every day.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I thought, well, I must be this terrible person if people are this mean to me.
Mhm.
And I'm in so much pain that the best thing I can do is just to end it.
Yeah.
And I didn't think there was any way to fix the bullying.
Right.
And it felt hopeless. And I think that's a beautiful thing to tell everybody,
Yeah.
particularly your kids. And I think it's a very loving parental thing to say to your kids of like, I got your back. Whatever it is, we'll
Yeah.
get you out of it.
Yeah. My dad still says that to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. And it's true. Like, there's nothing I can't imagine my kids doing anything that I could not help them out of.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And
I'm
that
the
would change how
fixer.
you feel about them,
I'm
period.
the fixer.
Yep. Okay, Shauna.
But I just feel like full disclosure, so when I was growing up, my best friend's father was a Vietnam vet,
Okay.
and he had a lot of Agent Orange on him, he had a lot
Mhm,
of trauma, and he had a lot of addiction problems,
mhm,
and I can remember being 14, 15, and this was my best friend at the time, not Stephanie, obviously, but I can remember being 14, 15 years old, and I would be at her house all the time because her
mhm.
parents let us do anything, so we'd be
Sure.
there all the
We
time,
all have
sneaking
those
out into
friends
the
that you're
woods
like
drinking,
right.
and he would be in his bar down in the basement of their house, and he would have Full Metal Jacket on, and it would
Wow.
be blasting, and he would be drunk as a skunk, and he would be screaming at the television, and he would
Oh,
be, just really, like, having a trauma response.
sure.
And I was, like, 14, and this
Wow.
was so traumatic to me to see an adult in this
Sure.
way, and then a lot of nights he would just pass out, we'd have to carry him up the stairs, put him on the
Mm.
couch, like, it was bad, and he eventually took his own life when
Oh,
I
gosh.
wanna say I was maybe 25,
Oh,
and it just and it was something that just scarred me, and
sure.
I learned so much from him in a weird way, like, in moments of when he was sober. I learned so much from him about the Beatles, like, he was somebody who
Mm,
really, like, loved the Beatles, and we bonded over that, but I also learned a lot about the Vietnam War from him, like, he
okay.
talked incessantly. So, like, I learned a lot about it, and I think that's when I became kind of very obsessed with it.
Did your father go to Vietnam?
No, my
No.
dad's Vietnam story, I'll tell it very, very briefly. My dad's, number came up, he was 18, and
Yeah,
his number came up in the draft, the lottery, and it was, like, a Thursday. And or maybe it was a Friday, I forget, and him and his friends all had their lottery numbers called.
sure.
So, they decided that they were gonna go down to the recruitment office and sign up, because if you signed up for the military, you got to pick which branch you want to go in, and they want to go into the Navy.
Okay.
So, they were gonna go, Friday and sign up, and my dad held back, and he was like, "I just wanna talk to my dad first, make sure I'm doing the right thing, blah, blah, blah." So, the friends went down, they signed up. I think it was that night, Nixon ends the draft and said
Oh,
my dad,
wow.
so the friends went. My
Oh,
dad didn't
shit.
go.
Yikes.
It's an amazing story. My dad has a lot of stories like that where he, like, narrowly escapes terrible situations, but
Yeah, my dad got drafted, but I wanna say he had, like, problems with his knees or something. I
mm,
don't remember the
he
whole
was
thing, but
4F.
he just didn't he wound up not
Yeah.
having to go. But his one of my best friend growing up, her father is a Vietnam vet, and he would never talk about it, but he had, like, all of these scars. I remember as a little kid looking at his back, he had
Yep.
all these scars 'cause he had all this shrapnel, and
Yes.
asking my mom about it, and she would, tell me in, like, four-year-old terms
Mhm.
what had happened, but
Well, and that's the thing, like, I have a vet that I bring into my classes to talk to my students,
Mhm.
and he says 20 years went by, and then we had our 20th reunion. That's the first time any of us ever spoke of our time in Vietnam. They never
Yeah,
talked about it.
no.
It's crazy. They slunk back into this country. It's terrible. It's terrible.
What we do to veterans in this
I
country
know.
is abysmal.
Like, they deserved a fucking hero's welcome, and they
They
didn't get
sure
it. They
did.
had to slink back in here under cover of darkness, which is
And
crazy.
they deserved a shit ton of mental health support, and they
Yes.
got nothing.
Yes. Okay, so now we see the end of the film. Kim says it's been over 2 years. I still experience a range of emotions. She starts to sob. David Cho says, I haven't cut my hair since he
Mhm.
died. And then he gets his hair cut and defaces one of his murals.
Yeah, because he said he's like, he would hate this, so the best thing I could do is deface it, which I think is actually a beautiful tribute to him.
Yes. Eric says, I miss a dear, dear friend. Philippe says, I was in Vietnam when I saw the news and I said, okay, I'm moving to Vietnam for good.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, Everyone is devastated. Lahal becomes a shrine, but now it's closed.
Leal is closed in
Leal, I'm
20,
sorry.
yeah,
And Octavia says, I have the best daughter, and I will always be grateful that Tony gave her to me. But this is the last time I'll ever talk publicly about this because I don't want to remember him this way.
yeah,
Brother Chris cries and says, I don't think he realized how much he meant to people. And they end with the Cape Cod episode where Tony says, I was an angry young man, but I forget what I was angry about. And then David chose defacing the mural.
yeah.
That's it.
I wonder, like, I think about, like, how would he feel about the fact that 2 some of us are 40, some of us are 50
Two middle aged
year old
basic
women
white women are talking about him.
are talking about him and talking about how much we loved him and how much he meant to us. I wonder how he would feel about that. I think he would be profoundly uncomfortable.
Oh, 100%. A
I
hundred
think he would
percent.
hate this. I
He
think
would
he would
hate
hate
everything
this.
about this.
But I
Yeah.
feel like it's the best tribute to him is to talk about him and talk about the way that he opened up the world to people. I Googled to see how many countries he traveled to. He traveled to 80 countries.
Wow.
Yeah. And
He opened the world to people, but he was also there was something about him because there's been a lot of chefs who've done stuff like that,
Mhm,
right?
absolutely.
But
Traveling chef shows are not anything new. His was so different.
there's something about him that he was like the common man. It was like a
Yeah.
victory for the little guy. You know what I mean? Like
And his
he
ability to connect with people of all ages, races, socioeconomic class, he could just kind of walk into a situation and show up in it and meet
mhm.
people where they were all
And
the
he
time.
he also like you see his quotes are shared all the time on Instagram,
Mhm.
right? He also like he was very elegant in the way he spoke, obviously, but he was also very like he had a certain protocol that he expected people to follow. Protocol.
Vertical.
Vertical. Like, he was like, "Treat your wait staff nice. Don't be a
Right.
fucking asshole."
Yeah,
And,
don't
like
treat people badly. That was,
yes,
like, a huge ethos for him. Don't be
yes,
shitty to people,
yes, yes.
which
And
seems pretty obvious.
we saw
Yeah.
that, like, he would treat a mother in Cambodia as eloquently as and with as much reverence and importance as he would a member of the royal family in Britain.
As he
He would
treated
treat
Barack
them the
Obama
same.
when they met.
Yes, yes,
Exact same.
yes,
One was no better than the other to him.
yes,
They were just different with different experiences and different things to teach him.
yes.
I think he saw everybody as an opportunity to learn more. And not in a mean way, not in I'm taking
Mm-mm.
something from you, but it's just you're going to be who you are and your experience of yourself is going to show me more of the world and show me more of my own experience with myself.
Yeah,
And I am not a word art person, but the closest I've come is to framing a quote of his. And I'm not sure like I keep going back on a number of them, but
yeah,
it's about travel and it's about how travel changes you
yeah, and he
because I
always said,
deeply
"Be a
believe that.
traveler, not a tourist."
Yes.
There's a
Yes.
difference.
There's a big difference,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, I've probably traveled a lot more than I've or been a tourist more than I've
Mhm.
traveled.
We all have,
We all
sure.
have.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was just such a beautiful human being, and the
He
gift that
was, but he was very I say this about John Lennon a lot. He was an
Mhm.
asshole.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Like I said, I
like,
don't think I wanna be married to him.
if you deny that John Lennon was an asshole, you don't know him very well. Do you know
Right,
what I mean?
exactly.
Like,
Tony Bourdain was an
he was
asshole,
an
and
asshole. But
kinda proud of it.
but
Not
there
not
was
kinda proud of it, he was proud of
but
it.
he was a principled, fair, decent
Yeah.
asshole, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I think there was a base level kindness to him.
Yes. Yeah.
I I love the distinction between being kind and being nice.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think he was nice. I think he was kind, though.
I agree. I agree. He saw
Um
everybody's worth and value,
Mhm, mhm.
and
He was
he
better than nobody in his mind. If
and
anything,
he
he was worse than everybody.
it was kinda the opposite. I feel like if you had privilege in some way, he'd probably treat you a little less.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
The easier your life is,
Mhm.
the more dubious he was of you.
And that could be part of his maybe he rebelled against his life because it was easy growing up.
Mhm.
He had the quintessential boomer childhood
Yeah,
and was like,
absolutely.
"I can't have this."
No.
No. Anyway, RIP.
RIP. This is a true RIP. I hope wherever he is, in whatever form he takes, he's at peace.
Yeah.
And I hope his daughter knows how much he loved her because he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful he existed in the world.
Do you think the film did a fair job? Like, how did you feel after watching it? Do you feel that they tried to, blame Azia or put her as some sort of villain in this? Or do you think that they were fair to her and just, showed his obsession with her, but also put it on him? And, how do you
I
feel?
think they were pretty fair about it. Um, I think it's important to understand his obsession with her and how that was impacting him
Hmm.
and how, as she moved away from him, how dark that made him feel and how hopeless that made him feel. Um,
Like, it's not her job to love him, right?
no,
That's not
not
her
at all.
responsibility.
Not at
If
all.
she wanted to move on, she could have moved on, and I feel like the film was pretty objective in their portrayal of her.
I
I
think
do.
so too.
Mhm,
I don't think it blamed her. I don't think it whitewashed her. I
mm-mm,
think it showed who she was to him and what
mhm.
their relationship looked like. I think it showed um I think I think how obsessed he became with the Me Too movement also really impacted him.
Well, that was his chance to retroactively protect her.
Exactly.
Mhm,
But also I think much like you going into the darkness of gun violence, I think he
mhm,
then entered the darkness of the Me Too movement.
mhm.
And again, he was an equal rights kinda guy, and
Yeah,
to see how women are treated,
mhm.
I think he just couldn't stomach that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I feel like he'd be the last person we'd find out a Me Too thing about.
Well, don't forget that his rise to fame was exposing this dark underbelly of the
Of
restaurant,
Yeah,
uh, industry.
yeah,
So that's who he was. He was somebody who exposed the darkest parts of the
of the world.
industries and things that we have come
Mhm.
to love. Yeah. All right, my friend. So that's been Roadrunner. Thank you for doing this
Yes,
with me.
my pleasure. I'm so glad you suggested this because A, I'd been meaning to watch it, and B, I will never turn down an opportunity to talk about him because I think he's just an extraordinary human.
Absolutely. I will be with you again to do Sister Wives this weekend.
Yes, you will.
I'll be on
And
my
then
bang trip,
and
but
then you go
you'll
on
be
your bang
holding
trip.
down the fort.
Yep, I got you. I will make sure we chat about Sister Wives in the thread and all that
Mhm.
stuff. So
All right.
I got us.
All right, my friend. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.